Watch your cornea. Same one. So here we go. In too much light. So we're going to do the same thing. So you're hearing the words coming out of my mouth. Let's do the pathway. We're going to start with the external ear, this thing that you pierce over here. We're down this tube, we're going to hit this thing. What's this thing here?
Tympanic membrane.
Tympanic membrane, or you can say eardrum for right now. Okay, the eardrum's attached to some things. What are those things the eardrum's attached to? What are those? Let's find out. It says on the picture. Those things are
Ossicles.
the ossicles, little baby bones. So those are the ossicles. Malleus, incus, and stapes. So here we go. Ossicles, which are bones. The bones are attached to the snail, right here, the cochlea. So that's our pathway. The cochlea contains the mechanoreceptors. So remember, mechanoreceptors detect vibration. So we're going to figure out how I can vibrate my snail. So you're hearing my voice. What does your eardrum do? It moves or vibrates. So we're going to vibrate the eardrum. What do the little bones do if they're attached to a vibrating eardrum?
They move.
They move or vibrate. If they're connected to this cochlea, what does the cochlea do if they're attached to the vibrating bones attached to the vibrating eardrum? The answer is, hey, we're catching on. All right. The cochlea vibrates. Okay, but how does that make me hear you? Well, we gotta go inside the cochlea. So I'm gonna take this snail, I'm gonna cut it up and show you what's inside the cochlea. All right? What do you think's inside a cochlea?
Water.
Air.
There's fluid in there. Glad you asked. So this is unraveled. I unwound my snail. Here's my ossicle, stapes. This is my snail. And there's the fluid inside the cochlea. So I'm pushing on the cochlea, and it's wiggling. What do you think that fluid's going to do? Move. So we're going to move the fluid. So by moving the snail, I'm moving the fluid. I'm vibrating the fluid. What do you think's in this middle part between the fluids? Do you have any guess what might be there?
The duct.
The duct. It is a cochlear duct. Indeed it is. Let's zoom in. Here's the cochlear duct right here. The fluid is in these two big ones. We zoom in right there. What do you see sticking up right there?
Hairs.
Hair cells, stereocilia. So if I'm moving the snail that moves the fluid, what's going to happen to the hairs? I'm going to move the hairs. And those hairs are the mechanoreceptors. They're neurons. They're nerve cells. I can prove it to you. Well, kind of. Look at the bottom of these cells. There's a nerve right there going to my brain. So I'm vibrating the hairs to vibrate the nerve to my brain. So mechanoreception. Right? So I'm going to show you an animation of this process, which is not that one. Oh, wait, sound might help, right? Let's try that again.
Sound waves strike the tympanic membrane and cause it to vibrate. Vibration of the tympanic membrane causes the three bones of the middle ear to vibrate. The footplate of the stapes vibrates in the oval
Okay, John,
window.
it's vibrating.
Vibration of the footplate causes the perilymph in the scala vestibuli to vibrate, which in turn causes displacement of the basilar membrane.
So what we just said is we vibrate all these parts to vibrate the fluid, to vibrate where the little hairs are. So we're mechano-receiving, we're detecting vibration or movement, right?
Short wavelengths from high-pitched sounds cause displacement of the basilar membrane near the oval window. This movement is detected by hair cells of the spiral organ, which are not visible in the animation. Long wavelengths from low-pitched sounds cause displacement of the basilar membrane far from the oval window. Again, this movement is detected by hair cells of the spiral organ, which are not visible in the animation. When the vibrations reach the perilymph in the scala tympani, They travel to the round window where they are dampened.
Let's figure out, why would I need to dampen or stop the vibrations?
You just keep hearing the same thing.
Otherwise, I keep hearing the same thing. So this is, the analogy is, remember when you were a kid and you got in the bathtub? You learned that you can push the water against the edge of the bathtub? Is that the one that did that? Okay, I'm a friend. Right. So I learned that, if you pushed on the water, it'd go and hit the other end of the bathtub and then come back at me, right? So I had an instant serve. And that was cool when you were 3, right? Well, think of the same thing. If you didn't stop the wave, it would hit the end of the ear and go back and reflect. If you know your physics, right, it reflects as an inverse way. So if I don't stop the vibration, you keep hearing the same sounds over and over because the same vibrations would never stop.
Is that what ringing is?
Ringing is slightly different, but it's a similar idea. So I have to stop the wave. It goes in one time, vibrates the fluid, and then gets stopped after one pass. So you only hear only hear one thing once. Does that make sense? So you want to stop an echo, right? So that's why there's 2 windows. There's an in and an out. One lets the sound in, one stops the sound and lets it quote out. Make sense? So I'm going to show you a picture of that again. So remember, they're talking about these little hair cells, which are embedded in those tubes. So as I vibrate the fluid, these hairs get bounced up and down, and that makes the vibration to my brain, to the cochlear nerve. Make sense? All right, so that made sense. Let me show you a picture to make a little more sense. The little hairs are arranged actually in a pattern. So if we go to this picture again, we're stretching out the cochlea. That little graph tells you which fibers where detect what. And no, you don't have to draw this. So high-pitched are here, low-pitched are there. Each section of the cochlea has a different sound it hears. So if I talk to you like this, I'm vibrating these cells here. If I talk like this, I'm vibrating these cells over here. So if you're listening to music, different cells are getting vibrated, and your brain interprets that as a symphony or whatever, by combining the different sounds it picked up to your brain. Make sense? Okay, so let's say I go out on the farm with a chainsaw at 90 decibels, screaming loud, really loud, and it's right about here. And I just run it as loud as I can, not your production. What do you think will happen to that little nerve eventually?
It'll die.
It will die. It will actually break off the little hair. So next time I go use the chainsaw, it's not as loud. I can't hear it. Why not?
Because you're not sensing it as much.
That's right. If I break these hairs, I lose the frequency they would detect. That's the logic of this. So, if you're driving around town with a thumpa car, ever hear those ones? Boom, 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 5 miles away? You're breaking off the hairs that are picking up the bass. That's why they keep turning the bass up, right? Because they're going deaf. They're stupid, right? So as I lose those hairs, that sound vanishes from my brain because my brain has to use those hairs to figure out the sound, right? So if you wondered what that screaming rock guitar did when you were 14 at the concert, I know what it did. It broke these hairs right about here. That's why the guitar was not nearly as good the next day, or whatever. So baby boomer deafness, they call, is losing high-pitched sounds from loud things like guitars, and you can't hear it anymore because your brain never gets the vibration sent to the brain.
So how come if you put earplugs in, you get rid of like a lot of the high frequency, like the high pitch noises, but you can still hear like low pitch?
It has to do with the kind of the physics of it. So the high-pitched vibration is a little easier dampened than the big one because the big one also moves the bones.
Okay.
So you could plug your ears and still move the skull bones.
Okay.
Large pitch. Make sense? So let's say you're having problems vibrating your fluid because you have too much earwax or whatever. Forever. Let's assume you never want to clear your ears. What could a doctor do to help you hear if this wasn't working? Besides an ear trumpet, what could they do? What do doctors do to help people hear if hard of hearing?
Hearing aids.
Hearing aids. So how do you think an old-fashioned hearing aid? My, grandparents, ever see the grandparents that have them on their chest? You're not old enough for that. Right? They used to have a big microphone you talk to, right? Grandma, can you hear me? That kind of thing. And it basically just put a speaker in their ear to make this happen more. Okay? But now there's a modern one. How do you get your ears to work now instead of doing that? They implant something somewhere. Cochlear implant. So we're going to go look at a cochlear implant, little animation. This actually goes through all that. So we'll go through this one.
Sound waves and change them into information that the brain can interpret, such as music or speech. Sound is a pressure wave that can vibrate either quickly or slowly. Slow vibrations produce deep sounds, while quick vibrations produce high-pitched sounds. Sound enters the ear and is directed through the ear canal, where it first reaches the eardrum. As the eardrum begins to vibrate, it sets the ossicular chain in
Those
motion.
are the bones.
The ossicular chain consists of the hammer, anvil, and the stirrup.
There you go.
Sound vibrations move along the ossicular chain and into the inner ear.
That's the snail.
Within the inner ear, the cochlea plays a central role. It is here that the mechanical energy of sound is converted into complex electrical signals, which are then passed on to the brain. In simplified terms, the cochlea is a spiral-shaped tube filled with fluid. Sensory cells, also called hair cells, line the entire length of the cochlea. These hair cells have varying degrees of sensitivity for the detection of different tones or frequencies. This allows the ear to perceive the entire spectrum of sound. The change from mechanical vibration to electrical pulse is a complex process resulting from the movement of hair cells in the cochlea. Along the entire length of the cochlea, the hair cells are arranged like the keys of a piano. Hair cells located at the base or lower region of the cochlea are responsible for high frequency, while hair cells at the apex are responsible for the low frequencies. As the fluid in the cochlea is set in motion, it causes a corresponding movement of the fine structures on the surface of the hair cells to take place. These movements cause tension differences, which produce electrical signals that are passed along the hearing nerve to the brain.
Saladin calls that transduction. That's what that
The
is.
auditory cortex of the brain interprets this information as sound, for example, as music or speech. The entire chain of events, including the various steps that convert sound waves from the environment into information that the brain can interpret, happens so fast that individuals can hear sound both continuously and instantaneously. Within this complex chain of events, there are a number of factors which can cause an individual to experience hearing loss. A loss of hearing can range from a mild to moderate hearing deficiency to a total hearing loss. In general, there are three main types of hearing loss which differ from one another depending on the part of the ear that is affected, be it the outer, middle, or inner ear. A conductive hearing loss is a problem in the outer or middle ear that prevents sound from reaching the inner ear. For example, a blockage or deformity in the middle ear can prevent the ossicles from vibrating properly. Middle ear infections or a ruptured eardrum are common causes of a conductive hearing loss. Often,
So let's go back. So conductive just means getting the sound into my ear. So if I can't conduct sound, that means it can't get to my cochlea. So it'd be eardrum, my bones, my ear canal. Those things are conductive. If you have conductive deafness, you can't get sound to the cochlea. You're not conducing it. Right?
conductive hearing loss is temporary and can be treated with medication or surgery.
Clean out your ears. That's the
When the hearing loss cannot be treated medically or surgically, the result is a permanent conductive hearing loss. In these cases, many people benefit from middle ear implants or conventional hearing aids.
That's where they're trying to yell louder out the cochlea.
A sensory neural hearing loss is the result of a problem in the inner ear. Sensory neural hearing loss occurs when hair cells in the cochlea are missing or damaged. These hair cells are responsible for producing precise electrical signals that the brain needs in order to interpret sound. When these hair cells are missing, the result is hearing impairment. When only some of the hair cells are missing, the hearing loss is classified as mild to moderate. In these cases, a middle ear implant capable of vibrating the moving structures of the inner ear or a conventional hearing aid may be a viable solution. Some individuals have a hearing loss only in the high frequencies, also referred to as partial deafness. In these cases, only the hair cells at the base of the cochlea are damaged. In the inner part of the cochlea, the apex, the hair cells which are responsible for processing the low tones are still intact. Combined electric and acoustic stimulation, or EAS, was developed specifically for these individuals to maximize the use of their natural residual hearing. When the hair cells of the cochlea are completely absent or damaged, the person suffers from a severe to profound hearing loss. For many individuals with this condition, a cochlear implant may be the best solution. A mixed hearing loss is a combination of sensorineural and conductive hearing losses. Mixed hearing loss results from problems in the outer or middle ear, as well as the inner ear. Treatment options for this type of hearing loss include medication, surgery, hearing aids, or middle ear implants. Your doctor will help you choose the solution best suited to your individual needs.
So that gives you an idea. So there's more than one way to make you deaf, depending if it's the conduction or the nerves in your cochlea. So either, how do I get out of this? So if you look at this picture here, this is summarizing your ears. Job. So my outer ear, you heard the words coming out of my mouth. Boom. Bang on the eardrum. Goes through the ear, the ossicles, which tend to amplify it. Hits the fluid, and then I absorb it. So that's the normal chain of events. So if you're conductively deaf, you're sent out from here to here isn't working. If you're neural deaf, it's basically here to here that's not working. If you're mixed, it's both parts. Right? Depending which hearing type of hearing aid, cochlear or not, they're trying to hit a different part of the ear. That's what they're trying to do. Right? So the more earbuds you shove in your ear and turn up, the more likely you're going to start damaging this part here, and thereby end up with problems in your sensorineural hearing. Make sense? So if it's too loud, it's too old, probably no. Right? Make sense? So we're going to do a little case study on the ear. So get out back to pain. We have a little case study to do. On page 15. Find a friend.
My friend.
Okay, so we had this speaks to my heart here. So I have a parent, it's the call, your kids are having a bad time, there's an expensive guy, and you say middle ear infection. All right, I live with those. So let's go down to question 1. Michael the child has a middle ear infection, otitis media. So where is your middle ear on our diagram? Where's the middle ear? Yeah, so basically between the eardrum and the cochlea, that's the middle ear. Right, so a middle ear infection means you're infected between the eardrum and the cochlea. So I go back to this picture here. You find your middle ear, just like it says. It's basically the eardrum to the cochlea, that middle chamber. The ossicles live there. It's not the Q-tip place, not the snail, in between. Make sense? Middle ear. Right, so he has a middle ear infection, meaning something's chewing in there. So, let's figure out how he got it, because number 2 asked that question. They asked about coughs or colds. Why does having a cold lead to ear infections? Fluid buildup, true, but why is the fluid building up because of the cold?
Sinuses.
Sinuses, but they're not connected to your ear.
Station tube?
What was it? I heard it.
Station tube?
Gestation tube. Let's go back to our ear picture and add some more detail. So we've been talking about the external ear canal hitting your cochlea. If you look here, there's another tube right there. So we have to learn about that tube. On the bottom of the ear, that's called your internal auditory tube. Is one name. Let's put it here. Or your lab manual calls it the pharyngotympanic. Pharyngotympanic. I'm an old fart. I say the eustachian tube, because that's what I learned. But But there are tubes right there in the bottom of the ear. It goes from the middle ear to jaw. To your throat. Why would you need a tube from your middle ear down to your jaw, down to your throat? Drainage, to drain fluid and to relieve pressure. Okay, next time you're in an airplane, you wonder why your ears keep popping. You've now experienced this concept. What would happen to my eardrum if there's more pressure on one side than the other? What would my eardrum do?
First.
It would go in or out, right? It would build up pressure, and it couldn't vibrate. So if I want my ears to vibrate, the pressure on the outside of my ear and inside my skull have to be the same. So this tube keeps the air the same on both sides. That's its job, right? Also drains fluid. So that tube is to maintain the pressure as the same on both sides. Make sense? That still doesn't answer my question. Why do coughs and colds have to do with that tube?
Bacteria.
Bacteria where? When you get a cough and cold, where are the bacteria living? In your throat. And what's going down your throat is this tube, right? So if you're a bacterium and you're just hanging out in someone's throat, you see this nice little tube, and what do? You crawl up and start chewing on someone's ear. Because that's a nice place to be. So unlike what your mom said, ear infections are not from the outside of the ear in, they're from the throat up. That's how you get them in there, is they crawl up this tube from your jaw and throat up into the ear, into the middle ear. So they crawl up the drain tube. All right? That's how it got there. So the more colds that you have, the more likely to get that. Yes?
So then why is there like medicine that you put in your ear?
Oh, that helps reduce the swelling of the ear. In fact, it can soak through.
Oh.
But the infection itself did not go through that way. It came up this way. It can. This is more common. Does that make sense? So when my kids got sick, I know about a week from now, they're probably going to have something go in their ear, because that's what happens when you get sick in your throat. Stuff crawls up to your ear. All right? Every parent's nightmare. All right? Make sense? So as you get more coughs and colds and flus, things in your throat, you have more bacteria to crawl up your ear. Make sense?
We should do what Grandma said and gargle with salt water.
You could. That reduces the inflammation. Right? Won't help the bacteria do much, but yeah. So let's go back to our case study. So they ask, is he bottle fed or breastfed? This has nothing to do with, the whole bottle breast fight. There's actually a physical difference between those. What's the physical difference between bottle feeding and breastfeeding in relation to that tube? Pressure. Okay, when you give a kid a bottle, they have to suck the milk out. So let's do that real hard. Hey, what just came up my throat? It's a loogie, right? I used that in middle school. So when you suck real hard, stuff goes up your throat. What might be in your throat?
Bacteria.
Bacteria. So you're sucking them up toward your jaw, which gets them closer to the tube. Make sense? So when you're breastfeeding, the breast is ejecting the milk. The baby doesn't have to suck so hard, so therefore it's less likely to get something up your throat. Make sense? So every time you suck up a loogie, you're bringing stuff up your throat, which includes bacteria. There's another difference. Does anyone know when you give a kid a bottle, where you put them next? You always put them on their back, right? In the crib, right? So let's do that, non-anatomically. I'm going to turn this baby on their back. So that's how I do it, right? What do you know about the tube? It's going down. What can go down with gravity?
Bacteria.
Phlegm and bacteria. So if you put them on their back and they're sucking loogies up their throat, stuff's going to end up by this tube, which means it's easier by gravity to end up in your ear. When you're breastfeeding, you're probably not on your back, if you are. So the child's more vertical, which means then you have gravity working for you, pulling away from your ear. Make sense? So there's a positional difference as well as a pressure difference. So breastfeeding is better in this context for that. Make sense? So you get coughs and colds, more phlegm. You're getting stuff up your throat. Right? Let's see what the next question is. Oh yeah, the smoker question. Why would smoking of mom and dad, baby's not smoking, why would mom and dad's bad habit affect the ear infections? What do smokers, when you're around smoke, what does your body do when you're around smoke as a child? You start doing that. You start coughing, you get lots of phlegm, you get lots of mucus buildup in your throat. And what lives in the mucus in your throat?
Bacteria.
Bacteria. So the more phlegm I get, the more stuff I get up my tube. the less mycelia work to clear mucus. Smoking is bad for people, right? So let's do number 5 then. I haven't had ear infections in 30 years. Why do my kids get them?
Your eustachian tubes are disabled, sorry.
That's right. So their eustachian tubes are flatter. What else might be a difference between a child and you?
Sleep more?
Possibly the bottle thing, right? Their tubes are smaller.
Our immune system's stronger.
Their immune system thing. Mostly it's that when you grow, your head gets longer, so the tubes get longer and straighter. Right? So if you look at a baby's nice little round face, the tubes are flat. So when you're an adult, it's harder for bacteria to get up the tube. In babies, it's easy to get up the tube. Right? You can still get an ear infection. It's just not as common because your tubes are better built for that.
So
Makes
when
sense?
babies get ear tube surgery, what is that?
So what they do is, if you're getting a lot of this stuff happening, it diminishes your hearing, right? So since they can't really treat the infection, what the doctor will do is they'll lance your eardrum and put a little hole in it. So whatever gets up in there drains out from the eardrum, so your eardrum can continue to work. So it relieves the pressure externally, allows the fluid to drain. What happens is, if you get a lot of this fluid in behind your ear, there's no place for it to go because it plugs the pipe. So there's more and more fluid, it begins to dry up, which becomes like a honey. So you get basically molasses behind your eardrum, so your eardrum never moves. Then what happens is you'll eventually lose your hearing because nothing's vibrating. So what they do is they just try to drain it out the other way, that way it avoids the infection. So if something gets in there, it drains externally as well. Right, that's what they're doing. So my daughter had to have them lanced in, and because she kept getting an ear infection, so I just put a little hole in there, and eventually that will drain the fluid out. That's the ear tubes.
And that little hole doesn't ruin the ability.
No. I actually asked that question, like, well, no, there's you can go up to like 0.4 millimeters, that's fine. 0.5, you're deaf. So they do the right size, they can still hear. Yeah. Yes.
Because I've had like 3 of them.
Right, so the tubes are supposed to dissolve over time, and the eardrum should seal, or they can pop them out. Basically, they're supposed to dissolve and you're supposed to heal up. They can pop out on their own, which happens.
So that pressure doesn't always just cause that, like your eardrum will burst, right? Like
It
it'll
could
pop-
burst.
Okay.
Yeah. So you lose your hearing, it could burst, you can end up with the bones getting corroded. So it's best to treat it, try to avoid that. Make sense? There's a problem with draining fluid to get your eardrum to vibrate again. There's too much pressure behind the ear. Make sense? Okay, so we understand that. Let's go back to our eardrum for a minute. We've been talking about the snail. Cochlea. Look up here. There's other things besides the snail. So we have to learn the other parts of the ear besides the snail. I'm going to show you a different picture. I'm going to make a little different list. Let me show you close up here. We've been talking about the snail shell, the cochlea. There's the fluid, that little purple line. This stuff is not a snail. This stuff has fluid, but that's not the snail stuff. This is the stuff we're talking about next. So we have 2 groups of things. We have these big guys over here, and these funny looking things here. They're 2 separate items. We're going to make 2 lists over here of what those are and what they're for. So say hello to the semicircular canals. This is our first option today. Can someone tell me why we call them semicirculars? They're half circle, right? They're the big ones over on the left. Okay, they are full of fluid. Just like the cochlea, there's fluid inside of them. And there are 3 of them. So I wonder what they're for if they're not for hearing. Why would I need fluid in my ear?
Balance.
For balance. And specifically motion. Their job is to detect when you're moving. Right? If I'm in motion, that's what they're for. All right? These other parts down here in the middle, the knot circles, these 2 guys, those are called your vestibule system. You probably want a different pen. Here's that. Vestibule. They're also full of fluid. And what do you think they detect? Static balance. Very good. So we're going to call that gravity and acceleration. So you have two different types of balances. One is, am I moving or not, which are the top ones. The other one is, where's up and down, which is the second one. But they're both doing a balance measurement by using fluid in your ears. So I'm going to show you those. I'll show you an animation. Let's do the semicircular canals first. So they're full of fluid, right? Okay, let me show you them in graphic detail. Here they are. Boom. So here are my semicircular canals. At the base of each one, there's a nerve. And it looks like this. So here are the nerve cells. Notice their hairs, just like the cochlea. And they're living in fluid. So if I turn my head, what do you think that fluid's going to do? It's move. If you've ever used a carpenter's level, you've done this. There's a little bubble in fluid, right? You tip the level, the bubble moves. Your ear did it first, because when I tip my head, the fluid moves, bending the hairs that my fluid's moving. It tells me I'm moving my head. Right? I'll show you another version of this, then I'll show you the animation. Which is right, lost my girl. There she is. So when she spins her head, the fluid in the tubes moves, bending the hairs. Her brain then knows she spun her head because the fluid is moving in the ear. Right? So you're using fluid to bend hairs to hear and fluid to bend hairs to know you're moving. Okay? But wait, there's more. Because the other part, the vestibule, also uses fluid. But how could your body know up and down? I can understand the carpenter level thing. But how does your body know up and down? Glad you asked. Because there are rocks in there. Medical technology people, otolith literally means what? Ear rocks, ear stones. Your mom was right. You have rocks in your head. Okay, which way do rocks go? They always roll where?
Down.
Down. So when the rocks in the vestibule move, they're going to move downwards with gravity and start bending the hairs to match. So if I tip my ear, the rocks will begin to move by gravity and they start bending the hairs. My brain interprets that as down. So when she does this, the rocks move in her ear, and so she knows she's pointing her head down versus down's over here. So now I'm standing here and I feel gravity. I'm not actually feeling gravity. I'm feeling the rocks bending the hairs in my ear. They're feeling gravity, and I just know that that's down. Right? So when you go in an elevator, and it feels as though you're sort of getting shoved through the floor, why might that feel like there's more gravity? What's causing that?
Because the bounce causes the rocks to move.
That's right. When you go in the elevator, the rocks begin to move, pull harder on the hair, so I feel more gravity. Or when the elevator goes the other way, what do you feel?
Like you're floating.
Floating, right? Because the rocks begin to move the other way. So my brain thinks I don't have gravity anymore. So my feel of up and down is solely due to where the rocks are in my head, in my ear. So I'm bending hairs with rocks, or I'm bending hairs with fluid. But either way, that's going to tell my brain where you are. Yeah?
What causes vertigo?
We'll get to that. It's actually a disconnect between what the ear is saying and the eyes are seeing. So the brain can't figure out who's telling the truth, so it makes you sick instead. Yeah, nausea is the brain's default that you'll fall down and cry and close your eyes and something should stop. And it makes sense, right? It's like hitting reset on your computer. If I turn it off, eventually it should work. Right? That's what your brain does with nausea. If you fall down enough times, you should be able to figure this out. Right? So I'm going to show you an animation of that thing. Let's go back here.
The vestibular system has important sensory and motor functions, contributing to the perception of self-motion, head position, and spatial orientation relative to gravity. The function of the vestibular system can be simplified by remembering some basic terminology of classical mechanics.
No. Okay, she goes on like forever on physics here. Okay, we're going to start right here.
The labyrinth consists of the two otolith organs, the utricle and saccule, and 3 semicircular canals. The vestibular hair cells, which, like cochlear hair cells, transduce minute displacements into behaviorally relevant receptor potentials, are located in the utricle and saccule, and in 3 jug-like swellings called ampullae, located at the base of the semicircular canals next to the utricle.
Okay, she's using $50 words here. Let's figure this out. Transduce minute displacements and behaviorally relevant receptor potentials. Okay, what's it mean to transduce? To detect or to translate. So there's picking up vibration and converting it to a nerve signal. I transduced. Right? What am I transducing? Small changes. That's the vibration. So I'm taking small vibrations and making them electrical. And that's going to make me behaviorally relevant, which means my brain's going to figure out what that means to my balance. That's what she's saying. So I'm going to take vibration, tell my brain the vibration. The brain figures out up and down. Right? That's what she said for $50. All right.
In the utricle and saccule, the sensory epithelium, or macula, consists of hair cells and associated supporting cells. Overlying the hair cells and their stereocilia is a gelatinous layer. Above this layer is a fibrous structure, the otolithic membrane, in which are embedded crystals of calcium carbonate called otoconia. The crystals give the otolith organs their name. Otolith is Greek for ear stones. The otoconia make the otolithic membrane considerably heavier than the structures and fluids surrounding it. Thus, when the head tilts, gravity causes the membrane to shift relative to the sensory epithelium. The resulting shearing motion between the otolithic membrane and the macula displaces the hair bundles, which are embedded in the lower gelatinous surface of the membrane. This displacement of the hair bundles generates a receptor potential in the hair cells that is dependent upon the direction of tilt. Movement of the stereocilia toward the kinocilium causes potassium channels to open, depolarizing the hair cell. The depolarization results in neurotransmitter release and excitation of the vestibular nerve fibers. Movement of the stereocilia in the direction away from the kinocilium closes the channels, hyperpolarizing the hair cell and thus reducing vestibular nerve activity.
So if you think about it, sometimes the nerve is going faster or slower. The brain interprets that change in speed as up or down. All right, so the change in the neuron tells the brain if you shifted up and down around.
A shearing motion between the macula and the otolithic membrane also occurs when the head undergoes linear accelerations. Hair bundle displacement occurs transiently in response to linear accelerations and tonically in response to tilting of the head.
So when you hit the brakes in your car real fast, that feeling is that. The rocks have moved in your ear, and therefore you feel like gravity is different, and then it stops. So not only is up and down, but acceleration is part of this. Yeah.
Where do they go if you're upside down?
They pull away from, what they do is they pull basically, they're arranged perpendicular. So one of them, they slide one way. The other one, they actually pull away, they pull off the hair. So you get less frequency in this one, increased frequency in this one, so you feel you're upside down.
Whereas the otolith organs are primarily concerned with head translations and orientation with respect to gravity, the semicircular canals sense head rotations arising either from self-induced movements or from angular accelerations of the head imparted by external forces. Each of the three semicircular canals has at its base a bulbous expansion called the ampulla, which houses the sensory epithelium or crista that contains the hair cells. The structure of the canal suggests how they detect the angular accelerations that arise through rotation of the head. The hair bundles extend out of the crista into a gelatinous mass, the cupula, that bridges the width of the ampulla, forming a viscous barrier through which endolymph cannot circulate. As a result, the relatively compliant cupula is distorted by movements of the endolymphatic fluid.
Okay, in English, what did she just say?
No idea.
Anyone hazard me a guess? All right, so basically there's fluid in there. Okay, that's the endolymph. This cupola is basically where the hairs live. So as the fluid tries to get through the cupola, it bends the hairs to get through it. Just like seaweed in the surf, to use a silly analogy. So as those hairs get bent by the fluid, the body knows the fluid is moving one way or the other. So I know you're moving your body one way or the other. All right? So this is going to show you here.
When the head turns in the plane of one of the semicircular canals, the inertia of the endolymph produces a force across the cupula, distending it away from the direction of head movement and causing a displacement of the hair bundles within the crista. In contrast, linear accelerations of the head produce equal forces on the two sides of the cupula, so the hair bundles are not displaced. Each semicircular canal works in concert with the partner located on the other side of the head that has its hair cells aligned oppositely. There are 3 such pairs. One pair of horizontal canals and the superior canal on each side working with the posterior canal on the other side. Both are in the same plane. The orientation of the horizontal canals makes them selectively sensitive to rotation in the horizontal plane. More specifically, the hair cells in the canal toward which the head is turning are depolarized, while those on the other side are hyperpolarized. For example, when the head turns to the left, the cupula is pushed toward the kinocilium in the left horizontal canal, and the firing rate of the relevant axons in the left vestibular nerve increases. In contrast, the cupula in the right horizontal canal is pushed away from the kinocilium, with a concomitant decrease in the firing rate of the related neurons. If the head turns to the right, the result is just the opposite.
So it's kind of cool as you realize that both sides of your head are reading the opposite direction. So your brain knows right from left because one side would be going faster, the other side would be going slower. Now if you think about why you need 3 canals in each ear, why would you need 3 in each ear? Anyone know what is a magical 3?
3 dimensions.
Yeah, 3 dimensions, right? You need 1 for up and down, you need 1 for left and right, you need 1 for back and front. So you have 1 canal for each dimension in the 2 ears, therefore no matter which way you move, something would move in one of them, right? It's like a 3D printer, but for detection.
This push-pull arrangement operates for all 3 pairs of canals. The pair whose activity is modulated is in the plane of the rotation, and the member of the pair whose activity is increased is on the side toward which the head is turning. The net result is a system that provides information about the rotation of the head in any direction.
Make sense? So the ear part, the cochlear part is doing the hearing by vibrating fluid. These ones are doing the balance by basically bending hairs and fluid. So different part of the ear, but the same mechanoreceptor, same kind of thing. So we're going to go back to your packet of doom. Right? Find case number 2. This one's on what we just talked about. We have Anna, who has problems of dizziness. Without warning, she gets a buzzing in her ear. Where do you think her problems are? Let's start big. The big answer would be?
Ear.
Ear, good. Let's be a little more specific now. What parts of her ear would be responsible for balance, dizziness, and sound? The inner ear would be the next one, right? And give me the parts of the inner ear that do those. Cochlea does one of them, the snail, and semicircular canals and vestibule. So the parts we've listed. So the inner ear is all the plumbing of the ear. You have these 2 and the cochlea are part of that. Make sense? So your job with your team now is to read about these 2 disorders and answer the rest of the questions. I'll give you 5 minutes and we'll talk about it. Figure out what's wrong with her based on what you just learned.
Okay.